Let's save this example as modularization number 3. Before I make changes to modularization number 3, let me ask you guys this one question. Does the parameter name for the passing and receiving has to match? Passing parameters and receiving parameter, do the names of parameter needs to match? The answer is no. As long as their type is compatible, they don't have to match. The names don't need to match. Okay. Now I'm getting rid of both of these and all of this, and I'm changing a few things around, okay? String ID. So in this example, you are noticing that we are accepting 2 values from user, and we are passing more than 1 values into the function or the method, and we are displaying those values. So you can pass 1 or more values or no value to a method. So we have done an example with no parameters. We have done an example with 1 parameter. Now we're doing an example with 2 parameters. And in this example, a very simple example, we're accepting 2 values, and we are passing those 2 values into a print report method. And the sequence of values are very important. If I switch the sequence over, it doesn't matter if the first one is even called name, the value will still be received by ID. The second one, even though it will be a receiver is called name, but if you're passing an ID over, it'll just receive an ID. So there's nothing in the names. The sequence really makes a difference. So now in this example, we are accepting 2 values and passing it to the user, and the user is working with those 2 values. Let's change this program to revolve around scanner input versus J-option pane input. So I will give you guys a few minutes to change this example around for scanner input. So right now, your example would look something like this. Now, to make things slightly better, I will create a value returning function, which will be of type string. The whole idea of this function will be to receive a message, give that message to the user, and then return a value back to the caller. So what we are doing is we want this job of accepting a value from the user to be done by this function. So I'll just copy these 3 lines and paste it. Oops. Let's copy these 3 lines and paste it here. Change this to message and change this to a val and return the val. Okay, so the whole function's idea is to accept from the user a message, display that message to the user, accept a message from main, display that message to the user, then accept an input from user based on the message, and then return that accepted value back to the caller. Once you make that change, then you'll make changes to the main method, which is instead of accepting things from user right in the main, you will simply make a call to value and enter your ID. You'll pass a message, and something similar you will do with the name as well. So your output will be no different. It's just like you've now modularized your code behind the scene. Okay. Now let's introduce integer So we will introduce our very first, instead of, let's do double. Double salary equals to value. Enter your salary. Who remembers last week, how did we convert a string to a double? Because we moved the entire logic of accepting input from user into the method value. So main is simply making a call to value and is passing a message. The value is displaying the message, accepting the value, and returning the value to the main. So the message is pretty much returning the value back to the calling line. So if I were to annotate this, I'll be like, okay, so main makes a call to value and passes this as a message into the message. The message then displays this message to the user, accepts a value from the user, and returns that value. And that will be an error because the incoming value is of type string, and double takes a value of type double. A salary takes a value of type double, and you cannot put a string directly in double. So my question to everybody is, how do you convert a string to a double? What you do is you enclose the incoming value to double dot parse double, and that's how you can convert. Now we need to update our report method, which is also to now display the salary. And we will pass this third parameter of salary. So now when I run this program, I enter an ID, I enter a name, and I enter a salary, and then displays everything back to me. We will be making some more changes to lines 14, 15, and 16 next. I'll be making the changes to 14, and then we will make similar changes to 15 and 16. So I'm using another function called printf, which is generally used to create columns in Java. So I'm creating two columns, and these will be the values of those two columns. So that's why I'm comma separating all three items. So I have double quotes, comma, another pair of double quotes, comma, and my variable. Okay. In the first pair of double quotes, I will say percentage minus 20s. That's for employee ID colon. So I'm reserving 20 slots for that text. Percentage minus 5s. So I am reserving 5 slots for the ID. Okay, that's what basically I'm doing. Likewise, I will just copy this, and then I need a /n because it doesn't have a built-in /n for a new line. Once you're done printing ID, just create a new line. Then we will copy this and paste it right below for employee name. And we're going to right click and paste it for employee salary. The problem will come in for line 17 and 18. The problem is because salary is of type double and percentage S is of type string. So we got to do something different here. So I'm going to, let me change this to minus 15s and this to minus 8.2f. 8.2 because 8 is the total length of the digits. So it's a 6-figure salary with 2 places for decimal. So when you run this, it will work very similar to in terms of accepting the value from user. It'll be the same, but when you are looking at your output is much column oriented, much controlled. So it will display the labels and will give you so many spaces so that all the labels end at the same column length, which is 20, and then starts printing the values.
That's really cool.
Okay. The minus sign that I use is for the alignment. Negative sign means left aligned. If I drop the negative sign, it'll mean right aligned. So if I drop negative from 20 and I rerun the program and I enter my values, so now notice the employee ID, the employee name, and employee salary, they're all right aligned versus left aligned. So that's what the negative sign does. It controls the alignment process. So in this example, if you notice, we are learning about two different kinds of functions. Number one, a non-value returning function with the keyword void, and a value returning function with a return type such as a string. And this is an example of modularizing your code without doing any object-oriented programming. So once we're through with this process, we will not now move on to our object-oriented code. When we talk about object-oriented programming, we're talking about solving a problem like real-world objects. If you look at real-world objects, we have an object that has a name. We have an object that has properties, and those properties are driving the behaviors. For example, if I take an example of a robot makes a move. So when a robot makes a move, it, for example, has a speed. So speed is the property of a robot as an object. That speed can change, and that speed can be read. Similarly, if you look at your vehicle, your car, the speedometer of a car reports on the speed, right? That is what it gives you. And when you press an accelerator, that's where it receives its speed. Similarly, when you put in gas in your gas tank, it receives the gasoline as an input, and what it shows you is the amount of gas it has. Based on your driving speed, it can tell you how long this gas will last on the average speed that you are doing, or the average gas consumption that you have. Do you guys follow that?